Has the Big 12 turned into the Pac-12, or is that just college football? We're breaking it down. It's another edition of Southwest Bias.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.
Of course, brought to you by Branded Bills. Elevate your brand with Branded Bills. I'm wearing mine right now, the perfect headwear and apparel. Use code PHNX for 20% off your first order. And of course, we're coming live from Studio K, presented by Circle K. Make sure you download the Circle K app today. Join the Inner Circle for free. You can see Mike Luke, who's joining me today for his Southwest Bias debut with his Inner Circle hat. Mike, the Big 12 has been Pac-12ing, in my opinion, as far as eating themselves alive. Have you noticed the Pac-12ification of the Big 12, or am I kind of on an island over here?
No, I like it. I think that the top end talent generally isn't as high as it was in the Pac-12 last year, but no, they do eat each other alive. And I think a part of it too is that these road environments, it's very difficult to win on the road in the Big 12. I think we're seeing that. This is not something where you're going into stadiums with 22,000 people. Everywhere you go, these are packed venues, and I think it's a fairly good point there, Mr. Ruby. When you look around, there's like 10 teams that could win the Big 12 right now.
Yeah, it really is a close race. If you're looking at just the Big 12 standings, tell me if you expected this 6 or 7 weeks ago, Mike. Texas Tech, BYU, Iowa State, Colorado, West Virginia, ASU. That's your top 6 right now as far as Big 12 conference rankings. Is that shocking to you?
Who didn't have that?
Yeah, we all know. We all know.
I mean, come on. Erik Ruby being modest here, like he didn't have that written up. No, it's baffling, though. It's wild. I mean, you look at some of the teams that were just supposed to stink. I mean, you look at BYU. They're 5-0. They're knocking on the door of being ranked. You look at a school like one school that I'd never really bought into was Oklahoma State. If you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. So I didn't really buy into that. Texas Tech's not bad, man. They're not a bad football team. You got Taj Brooks, obviously. Both of our teams have lost to Texas Tech, and it is what it is, but they're not bad as well. Colorado, hopefully we'll get back on the losing side here soon, but that was a big win against UCF. There's no way to put it. And there's been some disappointments as well, some real disappointments, but so far though, I have to say that the Big 12 has been incredibly fascinating. And I think it's probably the most interesting conference in the country.
Yeah, I think fascinating is the perfect word, because if you look at, let's say, the bottom 6, right? Here are the bottom 6 in the Big 12 right now. Kansas, who was ranked at the start of the season. Kansas, who had a Jalen Daniels, who people said if he stayed healthy, he could be a draft pick. He could be a higher draft pick. And Lance Leopold was maybe the coach of the conference going into this season. Then you got Baylor. Baylor's expected second to last. That makes sense. Oklahoma State, you weren't high on them. That was not the overarching sense of who Oklahoma State was going into this season. Obviously, Ollie Gordon was a favorite Heisman candidate. If you had to pick one player.
Your guy, Ollie Gordon. You picked him Conference Player of the Year, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I did. That's a hand up. I thought Oklahoma State would be better than this. I think team-wise, they had a lot of problems, but I thought the solution was give the ball to Ollie Gordon and get out of the way. And that just hasn't been the case. I think if I had to pick 2 players out of this conference at the beginning of the season that I said had the best shot of winning the Heisman, it was Travis Hunter out of Colorado, and it was Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State. And now there's no reality, Mike, where Ollie Gordon's even in that conversation.
Well, that's been one that's really, joking aside, has really surprised me. I didn't think that I would see every single game a stat line of 11 carries for 42 yards.
Right?
It seems like it's game in and game out. Oh, there's just something weird going on at Oklahoma State, right? Or Oklahoma State. I don't quite get that one. You look at some of the schools too, like you said, Kansas. Besides Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, one of the better running backs in the entire country. They've looked terrible. I mean, you look at it, they lost to UNLV. They just haven't looked good, man.
They've blown a ton of games. Almost all of their losses, if not all of their losses, they had a lead at some time late in the game and they blew it. I think TCU was the only game where they've lost by double-digit points.
Right. I'm surprised. Honestly, I'm surprised that I thought they were worst case scenario, they'd just be kind of middle of the conference. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised that they've been bad. That has been what's surprised me on when it comes to Kansas. So.
So that's the bottom 3. The next 3, TCU, I'd say is about expected. I thought they'd be a little bit better, but I never thought they would be a great team in this conference.
As your generation would say.
Huh?
They're mid, as your generation
Yes.
would say.
Houston and then Utah. Technically speaking, Utah in the Big 12 conference rankings is the 6th worst, or is in the bottom 6 of this conference. Now, obviously, in the top 25 wise, this is going big time off of conference record, in which Utah is 1-1, thanks to your Arizona Wildcats taking them down in Utah as well, which was a big deal. Although, you did play Isaac Wilson, so it is what it is. But to me, you look at everything topsy-turvy to finish out. You can go UCF, Cincinnati, Arizona, Kansas State. Those are your middle teams right now. If I'm looking at teams that overall general consensus would have been top 5, top 6 teams in the Big 12 going into the season, the only one who's actually in there right now in that spot is an Iowa State. And that is absolutely shocking.
Yeah, and the Iowa State is the one team too that when everybody looked at it, you're like, okay, they're 6th, but they're like a distant 6th when it came to when it came to that. But Rocco Beck, he's a good quarterback. I mean, we don't know what else to really say on that one. When it comes to Utah, by the way, nice little jab in there about Isaac Wilson. You guys are going to
recording this before, and we're going to put this out obviously before ASU takes on Cam Rising in his return this Friday night. If you are watching this later, we'll have an ASU post game tonight. If you're seeing it before, make sure you tune in. But yeah, I had to jab at Isaac Wilson just in case.
I was going to say, just in case you lose by a lot, and I get it. You played against a different quarterback. I get it, man. But also Kansas State has been odd to me. Because the way that they got, and again, it was kind of a fluky thing, but the way they got smacked around by BYU was, I mean, I remember tuning into that game and it was like 19-0, 21-0. Where did I come up with 19? 21-0. And it was like midway through the first quarter. And like when you see something like on a score and you're like, oh, they just must have it flipped or whatever it was. And I just looked at it and then I went on ESPN and I'm like, oh man, this is actually the score. Kansas State's odd to me, man. Like I thought they were the safest bet to be solid. And again, it's not like they aren't. We'll find out more. Also, go Kansas State against Colorado this week. But I was a little bit surprised, honestly, by that, and that they've been kind of up and down, a little topsy-turvy. But we'll find out more about them, obviously, in the next couple weeks.
And let's get into, obviously, our 2 schools. Of course, you host the AZ Wildcats podcast here on PHNX. You can find 5 days a week, including postgame. I'm on ASU 5 days a week, including postgames. And that has also been flipped around as far as Arizona State being 4-1 on the season so far. Like I mentioned, in the top 6 of the Big 12. Arizona, just a couple spots down, 3-2, 1-1 in conference. In between them is Kansas State, like you just talked about. But Arizona was supposed to be competing to win the Big 12. Do you believe that they still have a chance, the facilities to actually make that happen?
Well, Erik Ruby was a massive U of A supporter before the season.
Oh, was I?
I've got to give Erik Ruby I got to give him a hard time here. They haven't been as good as Erik Ruby thought they would be.
Right, yeah.
You know what it is, Oh, I mean, there's no way to put it. This is Brent Brennan so far has looked overmatched. I mean, I hate saying that, but it is what it is. What's funny is that the defense has actually been really good, which is not something that I think anybody really saw coming. But I'm sorry, man. If you got a T-Mac, who's the best wide receiver in the country, you got Noah Fafita, you've got a pretty solid running game, you've got NFL picks on the O-line, and you're running these delayed handoffs that are never working under any circumstance. And he had a really interesting line after the game against Texas Tech, where he was asked what was wrong with the offense, and he says, the guys are running in the wrong direction. So he was asked about that and in a presser this week, and he said, what did you mean by that? Like receivers are in different spots? And he just says, no, everybody. Well, that's what you want to hear halfway into the season when you have the head coach saying that everybody's running in the wrong direction. That's not a good look.
It doesn't bode well for the future prospects of the Wildcats.
Ooh, it does not. But I will say this though, Erik Ruby. If Arizona beats BYU, we're right back in the thick of things, baby.
Okay. So that's kind of what I was getting at here. And obviously, I don't love U of A, but I think that there have been some overreactions from fans. Now, I do think that, yes, if I were in your guys' shoes with the expectations that I put on this team going into it, then I would be massively disappointed with what's going on. And coaching is a big problem. And if you can't fix that, if you can't adjust, then that's something that only takes a change of personnel, which I don't know if you guys are looking at that just a couple of weeks into the first season under Brent Brennan. However, if you guys do beat BYU, with the fact that this conference is so wide open, I think that it could turn so quickly. In the same way, if ASU beats Utah on Friday night, they're in contention to win this conference as well. But if they lose, then they get pushed down. That's the thing about this conference that's so interesting. And honestly, it reminds me of the Pac-12, where it's any given day, one win and one loss can massively shift your prospects of winning the conference, being ranked, and now you have ties to the college football playoffs as well.
Right. Well, I mean, look at it last year, man. I mean, it felt like there was like 7 teams who were within 2 games of each other. Now, I mean, I think the one thing that the Big 12 definitely lacks is that last year, it's kind of weird. It was the most Pac-12 thing ever that you had star power in your last year in the conference, but you had elite level teams last year in Washington, Oregon. There's no elite level team. I mean, one team will get in from the Big 12, but no team is going to be making noise in the, in the college football playoffs. But I mean, I like it though. Like I said, you kind of every single week we're talking about it right now. Arizona's fan base wants to fire Brent Brennan, and you look at it. If you win against BYU, you're right back in the thick of things. So,
right.
And conversely, with the ASU, you guys were picked to finish dead last in the conference.
Yeah.
And there's no other way to put it. Dilly's done a good job, man. I mean, the Dilly's got those guys rolling. So we'll see. I expect reality to set in tonight, but who knows? Maybe it won't.
I understand the people who don't see ASU beating Utah, and obviously some people might be watching this afterwards, which, give me a sympathy like on this video if ASU did end up losing, and give me a celebratory like if they ended up winning if you're watching this afterwards. Either way, make sure you subscribe right here to PHNX. But with ASU, if your 2 losses so far on the season are to Utah and Texas Tech, that's not half bad. But as far as winning the conference goes, which is a long shot already for ASU, but was even longer shot just a couple of weeks ago before the season started, it's a good position for ASU to be in. And one of the things I want to talk about after we take a quick break is for these former Pac-12 schools, the Colorados, the Utahs, the U of A's, and the Arizona States, let's say the Pac-12 didn't disband. Let's say that everything stayed the same and the collection of teams that were in the former Pac-12, the former Conference of Champions, stayed together. Would these 4 individual programs be in a better or a worse spot if nothing changed? But before we do that, I must tell you about how to get yourself in a better spot, because you might look down at your feet. Everybody take a second. Look down at your feet. Look down at the floors underneath your feet. Are they up to par? Are they good? Are they what you want them to be? The reality is probably not. And if that's the answer, then you need to check out our friends over at Empire today. Now, easy, quick, and convenient, I like to say, is an easy, quick, and convenient way to talk about Empire today. But it's so much more than that. They're not just here to get in and get out, to give you the lowest price, give you some cheap flooring that they wouldn't put in their own home, make a quick buck, and dip. No, they're fast. They're focused on customer service, but they're focused on getting you the absolute best flooring. And they do that in a couple different ways. They have a curated selection that somebody can help you look through. They have a virtual floor visualizer if you want to see what it actually looks like in your home, in your apartment, in your business. We have Empire Today flooring here. You can do that. Plus, you can get an in-home estimate the same day as well. And if that wasn't enough, what if I gave you $350 off? Not me personally, but Empire Today. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use promo code PHNX. Some restrictions do apply. See EmpireToday.com/PHNX for details. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, we are presented by our wonderful friends over at Branded Bills. Of course, I'm rocking my Branded Bills right now. Mike Lucan is his custom inner circle hat, so we're going to let that slide. But they do have wonderful U of A hats, wonderful ASU hats, snapback truckers, fitted beanies, or tees. Plus, you can get your own custom brand on there as well. And on top of all that, look at that. Look at that beautiful hat. For those of you listening on audio, check out that beautiful hat. Come over to YouTube, but you just know not just the style, not just the feel, but it's a local company and you can support local, which we love to do over here at PHNX. So make sure you head to brandedbills.com, use code PHNX for 20% off your first order. So taking a step back at things, the 2 teams that are currently still in the Pac-12 are both 4-1. Mike Luke. If you look at the Pac-12 teams that are now in the Big 12, you have Oregon, who is 5-0, and then you have UCLA, who is 0-3 in conference, 1-4 overall, and USC, who's 3-2 overall, 1-2 in conference. And then you jump over to the ACC, which is still so weird for me. You have Cal at 0-2 in conference, 3-2 overall, and then you have Stanford 1-2 in conference, 2-3 overall. If all of those schools came back together for these Big 12 schools, the Utahs, the Colorados, the Arizona States, the Arizonas, would these programs be in a better place? Let's start with your Arizona Wildcats.
Probably about the same.
About the same? Because what you mentioned, the difference is the top end talent in the Pac-12 would be higher than it is in the Big 12. That bodes well for Arizona because to me, the fact that you could beat one team in BYU and catapult yourself back up to the top, you might not be able to do against an Oregon's of the world.
Right. See, that's the thing. You just hit the nail on the head. There's a drastic difference between Oregon and every other team that's in the Big 12. But when you look at it, though, there's a lot of teams that stink. UCLA stinks. Cal, whatever. I mean, I know they almost beat Miami, but Miami's fake good. They don't do anything for me. Stanford is Stanford, whatever. USC's talented, but it always feels like USC is never going to be quite there. Washington obviously has taken a big step back, losing their entire team. So, in a weird way, this year, Arizona, ASU could be right in the thick of things in the Pac-12 as well, just because outside of Oregon, there isn't an elite team that left at this stage.
Yeah, it kind of evens out. The thing with the Big 12 that you mentioned before was also like the road environments were a lot tougher. I think if ASU plays a team the talent level of Texas Tech, but they're not playing in Lubbock, I do believe that they can win that game. Because playing in Lubbock, the record there for Texas Tech, especially under their current head coach, is dramatically good. I think he's only lost like 3 or 4 games in his tenure there at home at Lubbock. So if you take that into account as well, when you play the USCs, when you play the UCLAs, when you play the Stanfords, the teams that you are probably better than or a little bit worse than if you're talking ASU, USC, however you want to go about it, you have a better shot to win these long shot games on the road in those type of environments. And for national recognition, for national rankings and everything, I don't know. Do you think it's better for a team to be successful in the Big 12 or what was formerly the Pac-12?
That's a great question. Probably the Pac-12, because the Pac-12, I think, still had a little bit more name recognition. It had more prominent brands. The problem with the Big 12, and I liked it, I'm totally cool with the Big 12, but the Big 12 just doesn't have national brands. It doesn't have things or entities that resonate nationally. The Pac-12, whether it was good, bad, and even though people made fun of it, you still had to. USC is a national brand that that speaks out. Oregon, Washington, you just don't have any of those in the Big 12, and I think that's why it's a little bit easier to kind of brush the Big 12 to the side. But I'll be honest with you though, man, I'm having a blast in the Big 12. I think it's fantastic. I think every game's fun. These are sold out stadiums, arenas, whatever. And then you got basketball right around the corner. So I have no quibbles whatsoever with the Big 12, Mr. Erik Ruby.
So let's take basketball aside, because I think basketball is a whole different animal in the Big 12, and super excited for both of our seasons. I think we're going to have good teams. Football only. Just focus on this sport. If you could snap your fingers and go back to the Pac-12 with this current Arizona team, all of its flaws, all of its strengths, would you do it?
Football only.
Football only.
Yeah.
You would? You go back to the Pac-12?
Probably.
See, I hesitate because
dude, I don't like that answer at all. I'm all in on it just because of basketball and the fan bases, but I think the football was a better product. But I don't feel great about that one.
Yeah, I think with the whole Pac-12 side of things, moving over to the Big 12 for ASU specifically, I think it opens up a lot of recruiting advantages for Kenny Dillingham and that staff, especially moving closer, playing in Texas, moving over to that side of the state that ASU didn't have a ton of exposure in. You can recruit in California and in Arizona. I think if you're just around that space in general, it's going to be a lot easier to recruit those kids, whether you're playing a USC or a UCLA or not. Plus, Kenny already has ties in those areas as well. Like you talk about Oregon, he got Cole Martin to transfer over from Oregon. I believe Jaden Fortier, who's going to be a tight end for them next year. He's injured this year, but he's a high-rated prospect. I believe he's out of Oregon as well. So for Kenny and the staff there, I think that moving over to the Big 12 kind of unlocks a whole new level of Texas to Tempe and gain that pipeline of also like Midwest or like, Middle America type teams too. So I like that exposure for the football program and in Kenny Dillingham. Plus, it feels like the Big 12 is actually excited to have them, which is a pretty big deal too. It felt like the Pac-12, if you go back to what it was the last year, you have the incompetent management as well. So I think just moving over to the Big 12 is a safer bet, even if football teams aside, it would be better still to be in the Pac-12. I think there's a lot of distinct advantages to be in the Big 12, plus excitement, plus stability. So I'm taking that.
Oh, to be clear, all things considered, it's Big 12 100 days out of 100 days, man. So I need to be very clear on that one, Mr. Erik Ruby.
Yes. We know this. Make myself clear. Mike Luke. All right, Mike, I appreciate you coming on to your first edition of Southwest Bias here. I'm sure we'll be doing much more in the future. You can go ahead and follow Mike on Twitter at Iron Mike Luke. You can catch PHNX Wildcats live 5 days a week, covering the games during the week. And then, of course, wonderful post-game shows, whether they win or whether they're sad and they lose. Mike Luke and company are there for you. You can find myself on PHNX Sun Devils 5 days a week, including, of course, post-game shows of the same ilk, happy and sad. We're there either way. You can follow me on Twitter at ERIKRUBY, and we will be back next week with another edition of Southwest Bias.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.